Hi, and welcome to today's session, a practical guide to operationalizing entrepreneurship within institutional frameworks. Today you will have myself and my colleague Fiona Heatley from the University of Glasgow, and we'll be walking you through kind of our process of operationalizing intrapreneurship. Bear with me for just a moment while I share our slide deck. There we go. So like I said, I'm Paige McCaleb from the University of Glasgow. In my role, I coordinate our external partnerships, including our role on the Aspect Consortium. We'll give Fiona a second here to introduce herself.
Apologies, everybody. I am sure, like many of you, are dealing with the joys of delivering webinars and simultaneously looking after your children. So we're saved from my daughter. My name is Fiona Heatley. I am the head of research development for the College of Social Science, and on my team is the research development and partnership engagement team. So we look after both the development of new strategic research directions and projects and programs, but importantly, my team also does the brokerage of relationships between our researchers and the private sector.
So this session forms a part of the Aspect of annual event that will be running across September and October. And hopefully you get to tune into a couple more of the webinars as part of that. For the purpose of today's webinar, we're going to start out with a little bit of a working definition of entrepreneurship, and then take you through a kind of canvas that we've developed, or a worksheet, to help think through some of the different kind of stops along your journey of incorporating entrepreneurship within your institution. We're going to use kind of the example of a program that we've been developing as we work through that today. And I'll go into a little bit more depth in a second. And then at the very end, we'll take some questions. So do feel free to use the Q&A function that's at the bottom of your screen as we go through today, and we'll circle back to those questions at the end. So to start out with, we're going to start with a bit of a working definition around entrepreneurship. Some of you may have heard of it, some of you it might be completely new. So just to give a really, really brief kind of working definition, entrepreneurship happens within an existing organization. It sounds a lot like entrepreneurship, which it is. They're close siblings, let's say. But entrepreneurship is about applying those entrepreneurial ideas and mindsets, such as kind of the values of using enterprising techniques, scale and fail quickly approach, lean methodologies, all of those to drive generation or value generation within an established organization. So for today, that's kind of our purpose. We're really talking about applying transformational techniques within an existing business, and talking about that and how it relates to social sciences. So here's our lovely entrepreneurship canvas, or entrepreneurship worksheet, as we're going to call it for today. And it really is just has boxes around kind of each of the big steps or big buckets of what you kind of need to think through if you're trying to incorporate this within your institution or organization. If you're not from a university, don't worry, that we think this is still highly applicable. And we'll give a few kind of hints about where you might want to tweak if you're kind of out with the university setting as we go through. So for the purpose of this, we're going to use an example of a program called Abacus, which is an Aspect-funded program that the University of Glasgow is piloting. And that program is about entrepreneurship within our organization, within the university, and placing our second-year PhD students within existing businesses. So we'll be going through that as kind of a very early stage project that hasn't quite yet launched, but we've gone through that bit of kind of gaining traction and gaining kind of excitement within the university and senior sign off. And we're just about to kind of start the full launch of the program. So that's what we want to focus in today, that kind of how do you gain traction? What do you need to think of as you're trying to get the foundation for entrepreneurship laid? So again, we're going to use this canvas today. We're going to walk you through going from left to right. You can really kind of start in anywhere that makes sense for you and your organization. And everyone will get a copy of this kind of worksheet at the end of the session as well as part of your follow-up.
Thank you very much, Paige. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the why around entrepreneurship. But before they do that, I think, you can see from what Paige is saying that here at Glasgow, we're still, really taking our first steps into establishing this in our own institution. I appreciate there might be questions. We're also really, really interested to hear from participants who may be further along this journey or have taken a different approach in their own universities, to see what worked with you, whether the barriers that we're suggesting resonate with your own experience, and to hear your good suggestions so we can steal them as well. So we're starting with the why. Paige, could you move along a slide for me?
Yes, of course.
Thank you very much. Many of you who may have experience in other parts of the academy, who may have more experience in STEM subjects, will be aware that placements and secondments of researchers, particularly early career researchers, it's a fairly established model of knowledge exchange between the private sector and the academy. I've worked in that side of the business before, and I've come to work in social science. And what we're talking about here is really kind of specific, we think, to our experience of the culture of the social sciences, very broadly construed. Our experience is certainly that culture of secondment and movement of researchers, postgraduate researchers and early career researchers, is less well established, it's less formalized, particularly with the private sector, and that there's a big opportunity being missed. There's understandably some great student support programs around entrepreneurship, and at Glasgow, I'll be interested to hear what the experience is at other institutions, but at Glasgow, certainly most of the students who are accessing our entrepreneurship development program and our business building programs are actually from social science, mostly from our business school. But there seemed to be a disconnect between a set of activity that's the cultural norm in STEM, a set of activity around entrepreneurship, which is dominated by the social sciences, and a gap in between. And this is where we feel this concept of entrepreneurship is particularly helpful. I think our senior leadership and our team approach has been to say that people who are trained as social scientists across the social science disciplines, from sociologists to economists to anthropologists, have really valuable skills and expertise and knowledge to be internal change makers. And the principle of entrepreneurship is based upon the fact that change and innovation can happen within big organizations and not just out with them. We really wanted to focus on grabbing those opportunities. And we recognize that many of our students will go on to work within established businesses, be those in the private sector or otherwise. And we want to make sure not only that we're sending them in with those typical skills around employability and of being able to work with one another and communication and the kind of standard practice that we might have across the board, but also that we're sending them in with confidence in their skills and abilities as social scientists, and with confidence to be those people who make a difference and who make a change in big organizations. We're also, the why for us, everyone will be aware in their institutions of the Concordat for career development for researchers. And we're very conscious that in the culture of social sciences, where we're trying to develop people's skills and capacities, recognizing that not everybody who has a PhD or who is a postdoc is going to go on to a career in the academy, trying to make sure that we are providing opportunities for those very talented, skilled people to find opportunities in the private sector that they might not normally think of or might not normally access. So that's a little bit about our why. I'm going to hand back over to Paige to talk about assumptions.
Thank you. So again, with assumptions, it kind of tags along the back of our why and again, this is one that I think can be focused on quite clearly, even if you're not kind of in the academy, of whenever we start a new program, challenging kind of why we think it's going to be valuable and why we think it's going to gain traction, and kind of making sure that we're validating the assumptions that we hold, and also challenging them. I think helps to narrow focus, and helps to define the parameters of what we're going to be looking at for this program. So for us, there was kind of two assumptions that kind of bubbled to the top. One of those was exactly around what Fiona was just talking about, of placements kind of equal or equate to kind of competitive and confident graduates and postdocs coming out of our university. And again, that's about kind of helping to create graduates and postdocs, and perhaps even people who are just looking to transition out of a research field, who have these confidence skills that they can come in and create business change and transformation within an existing organization, perhaps a big kind of well-established corporate. And I think for us, particularly in social sciences, kind of the second challenge or second assumption that we had was something that's quite an area of focus for us. This assumption is around kind of businesses having the transformational initiatives that our students and our researchers can solve, and also having that be within a confined kind of time scale for a secondment or for a student placement. Within social sciences, we truly believe that the skills that our social scientists have have the ability to revolutionize business and the way that the private sector works. But sometimes there's a translational need there between kind of what businesses think social science is all about and what social science is actually all about. So for us, we knew that one of the kind of challenges and assumptions that we were going to come up against is translating those skills and creating a framework and creating a program that kind of had into its core addressing and translating those skills, both in the first instance as we kind of went forward to a cohort of businesses, translating the skills that our students had, but also equipping our students and researchers to do that themselves going forward, to be able to talk about how they can create transformational institutional change themselves once you kind of graduate from the program or once you've completed it. And that was really important to us to have kind of as part of the foundation of what we were trying to do. So I'll hand back over to Fiona to talk a bit about kind of some of the barriers that we dealt with and some of kind of how we framed those going forward.
Everybody's favorite word, barrier. Euphemism. Before I talk about some of the bullets here, you know, when we were starting out thinking about this and about the myriad of opportunities actually of how this might be done, we had quite a lot of different things in mind. But one of them, and I'd be really interested again to hear in the comments and questions from other organizations and other institutions, is that certainly for us, we experience a certain amount of separation between the research side of our business in the College of Social Science and the teaching side of our business in the College of Social Science. This is something that we're really strategically trying to address at the moment, to make sure that activity in one sphere adds value to the other, and vice versa, particularly around external engagement. But maybe that's one that we didn't note on the slides here that we're trying to address. And that's part of the background as to why we wanted to focus particularly on postgraduate researchers and students in the first instance, as a vehicle to help us knit together the employability agenda and the kind of knowledge exchange agenda at the other side. So the key barriers for us were, again, you know, these are barriers that that I personally, in my career, certainly working in STEM, have come across and have overcome in the secondment and movement of early career researchers in and out of the academy. But again, kind of starting from scratch in the culture of our College of Social Sciences, at least, the barriers for us are in thinking about the timeframes in which our postgraduate researchers are available, getting the buy-in of their supervisors, making sure that whatever they're doing when they're going out on these change maker projects is contributing to the fact that they're still going to be able to submit their thesis on time, and or having a dialogue or engagement with the people who are funding their research. So there are kind of set of barriers around that to overcome, and that's very doable. But the other thing, of course, I think is the depth and breadth of our existing private sector network. And again, very interested to hear from colleagues whether their experience is similar, where your business school may have very many connections with the private sector, but those historically haven't particularly penetrated into other parts of the social sciences. That's certainly what it looks like for us at the moment. And again, a barrier or something to overcome there around knitting that together. Lots of knitting from me today.
So our next kind of area of focus was around the people to focus on kind of within the institution. Again, we've listed kind of career stage by ones that make sense within a university. If you're not in a university, these specific examples won't be as relevant to you. However, I think what you could focus on here would be around kind of department or vertical, something again to narrow. I think if you try to kind of cast the net too widely in the first instance for a pilot, you're likely to kind of not create a program that's targeted enough to succeed. So what, for our purposes, what we've done is focused that around second year PhDs. We kind of thought through our career stages from senior all the way on down to undergrad. And for exactly what Fiona was talking about there, kind of the triangulation of the time and being able to deliver a dissertation or thesis or step away from research commitments, that's where it made the most sense to focus. And again, for us, that was about narrowing it and pinpointing a group of folks within the university that we felt that we could achieve success with. And for entrepreneurial projects, one of the things that again kind of strikes me as something that's important is having them kind of be within a time frame. So we're creating business transformation and having that be something that can really spark change in a very kind of scale or fail swiftly sort of way. So again, for us, we started to focus on second year PhD students. That became the kind of point at which the program kind of crystallized around that. And again, within any institution or organization, be it university or elsewhere, people are going to have to step away from perhaps their kind of regular commitments to make an entrepreneurial project happen. So I think thinking through this step very clearly, kind of career stage or department, is very important, and thinking through clearly kind of who do you want to target and why it makes sense for them, both for kind of their personal career progression as well as kind of in the larger picture of the organization that you're operationalizing these sort of programs within. Right, and I'll hand it back to Fiona here.
Thank you very much. I'm just shifting around in my chair as Glasgow is too sunny for me to see the screen. Unbelievable.
A rare thing.
Strange but true. So we've already touched on culture quite a lot, but we wanted to talk about it a little bit more in this section because it's so vital, as many of us know, to making anything happen, quite frankly, and particularly in a university. And I was thinking as we were preparing for today, of a couple of instances over the past year or so that have been really transformational for us around this change in this culture of the social sciences beyond a business school, working with the private sector. And I think a really key step that maybe we've just assumed and haven't even written down here is that senior buy-in. Mm-hmm. And I think luckily for us, very interested to hear other people's perspectives and experiences. And we had a senior research colleague in our college who's a social anthropologist who works in the area of international development, perhaps the kind of social scientist who historically might have been as far away from considering working with the private sector as it would be possible to be, someone who was very suspicious of anybody who worked in the private sector's goals and motivations. And particularly suspicious of of large corporate private sector organizations. And through our involvement in Aspect, we've been able to broker relationships between that particular research colleague and very senior change makers within a very large corporate, exactly the kind of corporate she might normally have been suspicious of working with. And that actually has been revolutionary for us. And to be in the room watching those perceptions, those assumptions that people make about one another fall away in real time is incredibly powerful. And we now benefit, of course, from her own individual experience and having that happen, and recognizing that that many people who work in the private sector are just as passionate about social justice as many of our social science colleagues are, but just, you know, have different tools and different processes at their disposal to make it happen. So that's been incredibly powerful for us. So if you've got one of those lying around, that would be my first tip to find. Because of course we need internal champions to take on this existing culture and this existing kind of very active suspicion of what might happen to one as a social science researcher if one considered talking to a private sector organisation, let alone seconding one's PhD student into that situation. So of course, on the flip side, there are these issues around the perceived value of social science to business, and I think from our perspective, again, actually those things are relatively easily broken down once conversations can start to be facilitated. And that, you know, just goes to show for all of the brokers in the room what our key role is in doing that translation and that gentle hand-holding process that builds trust between individuals and enables people actually to listen to what one another have to offer. Paige, can I hand back?
Great. So next we're going to talk about operations, which in some ways kind of piggybacks off of culture quite well. Of everywhere is going to have kind of natural areas of inroads, such as Fiona was just talking about, kind of having a bit of an internal evangelist who'd kind of gone through this journey of being quite suspicious to quite keen on external engagement with corporates and private sector partners. And there's going to be kind of places where your operations or your internal functions are kind of ready and keen to support this sort of work, and places where it might be take a little bit more persuasion or have a little bit more effort involved. So for us, some of those kind of included a bit around staff time to support, and that was both kind of within our support staff as well as kind of our research staff. The way that our project started taking shape was very much so in balancing mentorship since we were placing students, to have both kind of academic mentorship as well as private sector business mentorship to really make the project super valuable to the participants at the end of the day, both for expanding their own network as well as kind of the input that they were getting and the feedback that they're getting during the project. So we knew that there was going to be a bit of work in there around finding mentors, both who were academics who were keen for this sort of work, and folks within the business side of our placements who are, again, really understanding of that kind of transformational value of social sciences within private sector organizations. And we also knew that it was going to take a bit of a Herculean effort from our support staff side to get everything in place, to get businesses in place and recruit students and get mentorships in place. And the program came together before the pandemic kind of ruled everyone's lives. So initially also to coordinate travel, which has obviously now taken a different shape, which also has required quite a bit of staff time to rethink that. So again, if you're thinking whether you're within a university or out with a university, kind of thinking through these projects is going to require a lot of setup time, just like any transformational project or any new project rollout. And kind of building that into the kind of institutional ask or building that into the project map as you go forward is quite important. We also knew that there was going to need to be a stipend for time, for asking students to step away from their PhD for a handful of months, that time is going to need to be reimbursed. So in part, that's what made the Aspect Consortium a great fit for this, is there was funding to kind of help with some of these more experimental projects that have a real value for change, as well as kind of setting the right transformation project. And this is kind of where one of the places that we are right now is kind of helping businesses set the right exam question, if you will. What's a project that is both time constrained, very ambitious and transformational, but also achievable, and kind of thinking through the right matches of businesses to join our program, as well as PhD students to join, and kind of matching those placements together is an operational challenge that we are currently thinking through. And again, making sure that the project is ambitious and that we have the support systems in place to make those achievable, but create kind of transformation at their core, and have that be at the core of everything that the project does. Thanks. Right, so speeding right along, I'll hand back to Fiona to talk a bit around some of the metrics that we're setting up in place to kind of measure and go forward.
So just before I do that, I was just looking at the Q&A there. There's a few interesting questions and comments to pick up on, and I'm really grateful actually to colleagues who are pointing us towards exemplars of things that they've already done that are similar. That's really, really helpful. So thank you very much for that. But I was struck by what you were saying there, Paige, around the COVID elephant in the room. Again, be very interested to hear from colleagues external to Glasgow what their experience of delivering this kind of project through COVID has been. Certainly from our side, I was in a meeting yesterday hearing that that across the University of Glasgow as an entire institution, over the period of lockdown and our subsequent in and outs, research funding applications in the social sciences have soared. And in every other part of the institution, they're either static or have declined. And I found that fascinating, and would not, as the head of research development for social sciences, have predicted that. I think, to me, it points to social sciences being very aware of the society, obviously, that we all live in, and have seen a crisis unfolding and have seen where they could make a difference. And that has been incredibly empowering and inspiring to see. So when we were thinking about this particular program, we've gone from a position of being perhaps slightly pessimistic at the start about our prospects over the coming months, to one where we are in fact quite optimistic, because the COVID pandemic, and again, apologies for the intense sunshine, I promise I am in Glasgow. The COVID pandemic has encouraged our social scientists to think on the spot and to utilize their existing skills and expertise in completely new ways. And I sense a much greater openness to working with a much broader range of partners to make change happen, which is what this is all about. So interested to hear your comments, colleagues, on that. So we have a metrics box at the end, and everybody's favorite. So we have, I'm just noting there's a question there around targeting external partnerships and networks. We'll come back to it at the end, but just to frame that and to frame this as well. And we've just gone through the process at Glasgow of creating a new strategy for the social sciences for research and knowledge exchange, which we're very lucky to have at our back as we start off on a project like this. Because we've had the big conversation within our college over the past year or so around metrics, around their limitations, around the desire of staff to have broad baskets of metrics that don't narrow them down, and that recognize achievement and activity across the spectrum of what they do. Having said that, we recognize that it's still a challenge to fit this kind of activity sometimes into kind of existing institutional hard metrics. Again, there may be differences here across the different devolved administrations. For colleagues in England, you maybe have, with HIFE, you maybe have perhaps more helpful structures, in fact, than colleagues in other parts of the devolved nations, but comments welcome to help you along with this. But with us, we were really starting from scratch to a great degree. So for us, we have gone back and tagged it to employability and graduate employability, and coming right back to our why, as Paige points out, thinking about career trajectories for our postgraduate researchers and our early career researchers as the key thing. Here at Glasgow, we have a research culture action plan that wraps around our plan for the Concordat for early career researchers. It's a real institutional focus at the moment around destinations for our graduates and destinations for our staff who may wish to have options to leave the academy. And of course, in this current economic environment, that becomes even more important. So we've tagged it onto employability and competitive of our graduates and staff. But the other important thing for us was making sure that the businesses that we're sending colleagues and researchers out into, that we're also meeting their goals, demonstrably meeting their goals. Paige, can I hand back to you?
Of course. So that kind of wraps us up here with going through our intrapreneurship canvas, if you will. So we've kind of talked about knowing your why, addressing your assumptions, assessing barriers, targeting a career stage, or perhaps if you're not within a university, career stage might make sense, but something like department or vertical might make sense there. We're looking at our culture, taking stock of operational needs and pinpointing some metrics as we move through this canvas. And hopefully that's a helpful tool for folks to kind of think of these kind of broad buckets of questions to be asking yourself or places to start as you think through perhaps implementing something like this yourself. So again, and I noticed we had a couple questions around this as well, of kind of perhaps different points in career stage, etc. So already we're working on kind of rolling out this initial pilot this year, but there's already been quite a bit of buzz created within the university about it. And here are just a couple points of where we're looking at going in the future. So there's quite a bit of buzz around creating a larger rollout beyond just social sciences, as well as kind of throughout different career stages, and kind of not keeping it for a long time, at least within that very specific bracket of second year PhD students. I think there's value across career stages, certainly to be had for projects like this, not just that single career stage. That's just where we've chosen to start. It's not something that's limited to that. Again, there's definitely an interest in applying the model of intrapreneurship within our research staff as well, and kind of looking at how we expand it as a model of placements and secondments across the board, as well as there's some interesting ideas flying about how do we operationalize that within the university and create some transformational projects ourselves, and recruit students from varying stages of their academic career to help operationalize those for ourselves within the university. So those are just some things that we're thinking about going ahead, or that might spark ideas for you as well. But we've chosen to kind of focus it on second year PhD students and their placements in the first instance, and look forward to broadening it out and seeing where intrapreneurship takes us in the future.
I was just going to add just one thing at the end.
Yeah, of course.
Pop onto the Q&A. I think one of the things that really struck me when we put an initial paper together around this within University of Glasgow was the interest that it sparked out with the social sciences. And as an engineer who now works in social science, actually I was quite surprised about that. This movement of people in and out of research to industry settings seems to me like a very established model, and we've got nothing to teach them. More fool me, because this key hook around enabling people to go out and be internal change makers within bigger organizations was seen as a massive value add to our early career researchers in STEM as well. So that's been incredibly heartening. So we look forward to expanding our program and rolling it out further.
Perfect. So if there's any more questions to be asked, go ahead and pop those in the Q&A box just now. And then we'll just start kind of tackling some of these for the duration of our time. So Fiona, I will read the first question here, and then you can get started on answering it, and I'll chime in.
Thanks, Kate.
This one says, what role do external network partners play within your intrapreneurship? Do the intrapreneurship teams work on given challenges or problems?
It's a really great question. Thank you for that. Again, speaking honestly about where our institution is at and where our social science, our College of Social Sciences is at, I think we did an exercise maybe two or so years ago. The institution was looking for a kind of paper trail, a metric trail to see where we thought our strategic corporate partnerships were. We took the model for doing that, the kind of measures that were being used, and tried to apply it to the social sciences, finding, of course, that the measures that were being used, typically commercialization or secondments to businesses through KTPs or EPSRC IA projects, for example, didn't work for tracking where our partnerships were in the social sciences, because the culture, at least here at Glasgow, was of secondments happening with no financial transaction, or collaboration happening with no financial transaction, therefore untraceable by contract. So what we did at that point was did a trial on completely different measures, things that worked for the social sciences, and came up with a very different analysis of where our strategic partners were. And perhaps unsurprisingly, they were with the policy and practice community in the main. And our partnerships with the private sector were really limited, I would say, to very intense partnerships with our business school and very intense partnerships around employability. So we're tackling that head on. And as part of our new college research and knowledge exchange strategy, we have 5 interdisciplinary research themes that have been put together. And our focus really now is around building our external networks around those themes. So that's a job of work that we're currently doing, for the very specific focus on where our private sector partnerships for each of those should be. And each of those, they're not traditionally things where a university would seek private sector partnerships. One of them is addressing inequalities. One of them is sustainability. But that's the piece of work that we're doing now. So to answer the question, if people are going to be working on given challenges and problems, I think that would probably tend to be our approach, is to weave this into partnerships that we're building more broadly. And yes, absolutely, for these projects to be geared towards answering the challenges that those businesses are articulating. Is there anything that you'd add, Paige?
I think that was fairly comprehensive. Let me just read the original question and make sure there's nothing else I can lend to that. I think when you say, do the intrapreneurship teams work on kind of given challenges or problems, like I said, we're also working quite closely with kind of the businesses that we're recruiting to set their challenges as well, which is perhaps a bit of a different take on the question, but we're working with to make sure that those are the right questions, that kind of not only is the business asking a question and kind of framing it in a way that's actually going to be transformational to them, but it's also something that works for the students that we're placing. So I think there's a bit around kind of that relationship building there as well, of that, yes, we're kind of in some ways targeting those interdisciplinary research themes and kind of building really foundational partnerships for us as the social sciences and the disciplines that we work with. But also kind of making sure that those individual relationships are working both ways, that we're kind of making sure that the business is really getting something out of their relationship with us, as well as the student getting something out of the relationship with the business, and that kind of everyone comes away with an experience that's transformational for them as well. And I think that's something that's very important as we go forward, is to make sure that both sides come away with their needs met.
So Paige, I'm just looking down the questions here, and actually I think this one naturally leads on to another colleague who's asked a question around which roles or departments of your business partners are the main targets. So
I see that.
To help recruit talent, or business unit because the project is generous business impact. And I think from my experience to date, certainly it's the latter, and it's the latter because of what Paige is saying about that careful choice of project. So it's not just you're getting a free intern for 3 months to do that thing, but you're getting someone with a particular skill set to come in and challenge you. And what we're noticing, of course, that in many, including kind of major corporate organizations, they recognize that innovation often comes from outside their own organization, or they're creating internal entities that can drive innovation within their business and drive change within their business. So those are the places that we're tending to target and to find the kind of projects that will work for this model. Is that fair, Paige?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that one of the kind of key differences is we didn't want this to be not just an internship. Internships are incredibly valuable, but we didn't want it to be another internship scheme. Yes, those are incredibly valuable, but that's not exactly what we wanted to accomplish with this. I think the key difference was really making sure the projects are embedded in entrepreneurial values of creating value generation and creating that in a way that is utilizing entrepreneurial skills, and that we're really looking at kind of creating this key dialogue between social scientists and the private sector around kind of the transformational skills that social scientists offer. And I think that was the key difference to us. It's not, I've got a gala coming up, but I need a handful of interns to run this and make sure it comes off a huge success, which is important and incredibly valuable to both student and business. But that wasn't what we wanted to achieve with this project. We want to achieve something that is very transformational, and that really embeds social science skills and disciplines at the core of that transformation. So again, that really requires, I think, the kind of individual unit to create those relationships and do a really targeted matching between student going on the placement and business, to make sure that they're a really good culture fit as well as a fit for the project that's being proposed.
The next question is making me smile, Paige. It says, would it be possible to think about the last year of the PhD, which is making me think of the last year of my PhD, which is a painful memory. So I think, taking that slightly more seriously, I think it's possible. I think we've particularly chosen to focus on the second year of the PhD because perhaps that's a point in the journey of somebody's postgraduate research where they still have the freedom and flexibility to go and take time out to do this. The last year of my PhD, where if other people have happier experiences, I'd be very glad to meet them. But the pressure was really on to produce the results, to get the doctorate and get it written up, and for me to get it written up before my son was born. But I think we are trying to avoid that period of the PhD which is most pressured for both the PhD researcher and for the supervisor, in the context of us all being under pressure to increase completion rates. It does make me think though that actually I wonder why the first year might not be probably the best place. The first year is possibly where you have the most freedom of all. But I think we went for seconds, as a balance between somebody having the skills and knowledge and confidence, quite frankly, to go into a business and challenge what people are doing, from some kind of position of authority, versus them being very constrained by actually needing to get their doctorate and submit their thesis. Is that fair, Paige?
Yeah, I'm trying to remember back to those conversations. I think a lot of them happened about a year ago. Like I said earlier as well, we're definitely keen on and excited about expanding it kind of across many different years and career stages of kind of the academic life cycle, if you will. I think that kind of narrowing down came exactly what Fiona was saying, of kind of having the clout and the confidence to come into a business and challenge and spark change. We thought in the first instance should be definitely kind of postgraduate or beyond level. Not that it's impossible to do that with undergraduates. I think just the kind of framework and mentorship around it would need to be constructed a bit differently. So we knew it would be postgraduate onward. And for most masters, that's such a confined time that it would be very difficult to take kind of 3 months away. And so we kind of took off our kind of PGR and PGT programs, struck off the list for the pilot there. And then exactly what Fiona was saying around the kind of latter part of the PhD being so pressured. And I think, if I remember right, our discussion around first year PhD was around kind of getting your footing under you and kind of getting that rapport built up between you and your supervisor, and all those bits being quite important to kind of setting your PhD off on the right foot. And again, this was about kind of creating the right starting point. It's not necessarily creating the only starting point or creating the only point this program will ever take place. It was just about where do we concentrate our fire for this first round, essentially, and where do we kind of see the most area of opportunity. So definitely at some point, if last year PhD students think that they're ready to take it on, that wouldn't be completely struck off the list. It's something that we're definitely willing to consider. It's just kind of where do we start was the main question.
It does make me reflect, however, for those of you who are familiar with the knowledge transfer program, and who maybe have set up KTP projects in the past. When I was doing that as a large part of my job, then many of the KTPs that we were trying to set up, doing large strategic projects in businesses, they were built in such a way that the KTP associate who was going in to undertake that work would be doing their doctorate at the same time. And that is really that would be the ultimate goal of what we start seeing in social scientists PhDs, be they sociologists or criminal justice or anthropologists. I'm all about the anthropologists today. That we would start seeing those experiences being brought into their research and influencing their research, and enabling them to get their doctorate. But I think that is going to take some time to develop culture and understanding on both sides to get there.
Great. Just flicking through the questions here. Perhaps this is a good one to tackle next. What's the most critical challenge and or assumption for your model? And maybe each Fiona and I can each take a take on that.
If I'm speaking frankly, apologies, we have a 6-year-old contributor again. Then I think the most critical assumption, and this is me speaking as an engineer, I almost feel like a traitor, so don't come and stab me on the bed. But the most critical assumption, I think, is that social scientists, be they sociologists or criminal justice researchers or whatever, have the skills and knowledge to see these kind of transformation projects through in what is going to be an incredibly new environment. That's going to take a lot of courage on the part of those researchers, and that's the biggest assumption for me that I think is going to be tested. Paige, I'm going to hand over to you so I can deal with it.
Yeah, no worries. Mine's actually, I think, quite similar. I think the assumption around this type of work is primarily focused in STEM. I think is one that's a critical one for us to address, not only in this project, but as social sciences in general, are kind of what's being newly branded as the SHAPE disciplines. There's this assumption that STEM is very good at this and kind of has it down to a T what they're doing. But I think that, and I come from a social sciences background, and have worked in STEM, so perhaps kind of the opposite way of Fiona in a lot of ways.
To my young page.
and so I think for me, I see incredible value in what kind of social sciences have to offer, and I see incredible value in social science has people at its core, and every business works with people, whether the people that staff and kind of create are part and parcel with making your business happen, or the people that you are selling or serving to in your business. So for me, I think it's that translation between the skills that social scientists have to offer and how they can underpin change, and how they can underpin a real transformation that for a lot of businesses, want to make sense in their bottom line. That social scientists can help kind of move the needle on whatever that bottom line looks like for you is often something that we have kind of a translatory need to do as social scientists. And I think for me, the challenge of kind of equipping our social scientists to be able to say that and be able to translate their skills in a way that make real sense to businesses is a huge win. And particularly if we can get folks kind of at the beginning of their careers being able to do that, and whether that be a career within the academy or out with the academy, I think that those skills have incredible value, and helping to equip that selling of those skill sets in a way that makes sense is really important.
Open minds, essentially, yeah. There's a really great question page here around technology, which I would really like to address, just keeping an eye on our time. It says technology is the heart of the organization. Mm-hmm. As we move towards giving greater control to AI, it could be a reason for a disconnect between entrepreneurs and universities. And what steps are we taking to infuse more technical learning? It's a really great question. And again, one that we've been reflecting on, not only in the fourth industrial revolution context, but in the context of COVID. Thinking about, for many of our researchers, the new and different skills they're going to need simply to do the research they were already doing in what is now a remote context. Although I note that we have a contributor here who said that COVID, we've gone from physical to limitless and more inclusivity. I love that. That's fantastic. Yeah, a more limitless context. Here at Glasgow, we host the Urban Big Data Centre, which is one of the ESRC's kind of key data investments. So we're in fact incredibly lucky that we have that infrastructure within our college, and we have some really amazing skill sets and expertise around data and the data economy. So I think for us, spreading the learning out from that internal centre of expertise to the broader college across the career stages is already a talking point within our college management. And again, I think the COVID scenario just emboldens that even further, because we're going to have to do more secondary data analysis, not less. So for us, it's going to really come from a data standpoint, and there's a really nice confluence of circumstance and a really nice confluence of expertise that we have in Glasgow here to take advantage of. But yeah, it's a really good point.
Yeah. If I may, I kind of have two thoughts on both that one as well as the one around COVID taking us to a place of limitlessness. I think that's a lovely way to phrase that. So initially, again, like I said, we kind of started to think about this project maybe a year and a half ago. And obviously that was kind of the dream for that was physical placements within businesses. And obviously that's kind of been back burner to put to the side for now. But again, that's actually really opened us up to the type of placements and the physical locations that those placements can be in relation to where the person going on placement can be. And we found that quite freeing, if you will, of that people from loads of different backgrounds and loads of different kind of life circumstances can be placed somewhere where they might not have been able to be previously. If you've got, caring responsibilities or anything of that nature, you might not have been able to take a placement that was physically far away, whereas now that's a possibility, for example. So we've definitely experienced having to think on our feet of how to change the program and shake some things up, but also that's lended to real diversity of participants being able to come along, and that's been really great, and also enabled by technology. I think kind of as this piece of work as a larger whole, kind of around commercialization and entrepreneurship within the social sciences, sometimes kind of that disconnect between entrepreneurs and the academy happens, of particularly when we talk about working with startups or early stage businesses and pitch meetings and venture capitalists. Some of our researchers, get kind of silver dollar eyes. But again, we find that there's, like you said, there's just ways to infuse that technological learning that aren't scary or that don't have kind of a massive leap to overcome. So we actually find that kind of when we sit down and have those really relational talks, kind of with all of the stakeholders on any given project, be it an intrapreneurship project or placing a senior researcher with early stage venture for a handful of months, we find that relational aspect really makes those differences and those disconnects more easily bridged. That there's definite possibility within those of our researchers at any stage and businesses at any stage to gain value from one another and develop a real relationship that can really flourish and make change happen.
We just have a few minutes left, Paige. I just want to say thank you to a colleague at Manchester Met for posting the link there to your project. I'm definitely going to take a look at that, so thank you very much. And also to Fiona, who's just made a comment around the role of social science in the private sector. To be successful, technology needs social science input. I must sound sometimes, I think, like a terrible warrior or an underminer of the value of social science. But as someone who has 3 engineering degrees and came into work in social science and research development for the first time, I could not agree more. And it's really inspirational to work in social science, and to be the fly on the wall when you're seeing the technologists meeting the people scientists, and seeing those blinkers fall, and those new questions being put into people's minds, and people really changing how they're doing things. It's magical. It's magical. So I know in my bones that it can happen. And I really hope that with what we're doing, we see many more examples of it here at Glasgow.
Perfect. Well, I think that's a great wrapping up point for the day. Thank you to everyone for joining us. I hope you found it kind of both enjoyable and valuable. And we hope very much that you're able to join some of the other Aspect annual event sessions over the coming weeks and into October.
I'm sure my daughter won't interrupt those.
So just as a follow-up to this, I think you'll be getting an email in the coming days with both kind of a link to this webinar if you would like to rewatch it for your viewing pleasure, as well as some of our slides and the blank copy of kind of the worksheet that we've worked our way through today, if you want to use that as something to help you in the future as well. And like Fiona said, we're really keen to hear other people's thoughts and kind of the opportunities as well as the barriers that you're experiencing across your universities as well. And we're excited to kind of continue the conversation across the board.
Thank you so much, everybody.
Thank you.